We know this man, the icon of Field of Dreams, the steadfast bodyguard of the bodyguard, the silent king of Yellowstone, a Hollywood legend. But what if I told you that the greatest, most tragic, and most daring film of Kevin Costner's life is his real-life story? Have you ever promised to take a bullet for the one you love, even when your heart has been shattered? Have you ever looked toward the horizon, knowing you had to risk everything, family, fortune, reputation, just to see what lies on the other side? This is not a movie script. This is the truth. A story of ultimate glory and 2 divorces that shook his empire. A father of 7 children, a heart full of scars. And now, at the age of 70, he is betting his last dollars on a dream that could either save him or ruin him forever. To discover the real man behind the legend, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Which Kevin Costner movie defined your youth? An icon of American cinema, the steadfast protector in The Bodyguard, the dreamer in Field of Dreams, and the courageous filmmaker who forever changed the way Hollywood tells stories with Dances with Wolves. He embodies the silent American hero. With steadfast blue eyes, a calm voice, and an unshakable moral stance, he is the man we trust to do what's right even when the whole world is burning. But behind that monument, there is a man, an architect of emotions, someone who has spent his life building magnificent worlds on screen while frequently watching his own world crumble to pieces. From the dusty roads of Linwood, California, the son of a humble ditch digger, he rose not by privilege but by sheer will. But that will came at a cost. This is not a story about a Hollywood star. This is a story about a heart full of scars, a journey shaped by quiet losses. 2 marriages shattered like storms, 7 children from 3 women, and an ongoing battle against silence. The spotlight cannot warm an empty home. The Oscars cannot drown out the whispers of regret. And now, at the age of 70, as the storm returns once again, darker and fiercer than ever, Kevin Costner is making the final bet of his life. A bet not for glory, but for redemption. This is the story of a man who has silently bled bearing the cross of fame, yet still choosing to shine. This is Horizon by Kevin Costner. It's heartbreaking to imagine that the man with silent strength who one day would stir the entire world began his life in silence and darkness. Kevin Michael Costner was born on January 18, 1955 in Linwood, California. He wasn't a boy destined to stand in the spotlight. He was frail, small, and overwhelmed by uncertainty. His father, William Bill Costner, was a man of the land. Originally a ditch digger, later a lineman. His hands were rough and scarred, always carrying the scent of oil and metal. His mother, Sharon Ray, was a social worker, carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders every day, and returning home with tired eyes, yet still humming softly as she cooked dinner. They were an ordinary family living on the edge of survival. Their dreams were simple, but behind that warmth, there was a silence. A shadow that never left the family. The girls with their nails done. 2 years before Kevin was born, in 1953, tragedy struck. His middle brother, Mark Douglas Costner, lived only 1 day before his tiny heart stopped beating. It was a quiet loss, a pain that was never spoken of, but it forever shaped their family. The love within the Costner family grew stronger, protective, and at times, harsh. Bill became more strict, determined to shield his remaining children from a world he no longer trusted. Sharon, though gentle, was quieter. Kevin would often find his mother standing still in the kitchen, her eyes fixed on an empty corner of the room, a gaze filled with love and a memory of a child she would never hold. That absence hung in the air, and perhaps it was there in that unspoken pain that Kevin first learned the power and the danger of silence. His childhood was a soundtrack of tape being ripped from cardboard boxes. The Costner family was constantly moving Compton, Ventura, Visalia, Orange County, chasing Bill's work, chasing stability, but never holding on for long. By the age of 12, Kevin had packed more of his life into boxes than anyone else. Each move was a small pain, a new school, new faces, new beginnings that always ended too soon. He wasn't a loud child. He was the quiet boy sitting at the back of the class, the one the teacher always forgot to call on. He was the invisible child. "We were always packing up, always starting over," he would later recall. "I learned to keep my world inside." When the moving trucks pulled away, Kevin sat in the back seat watching the streetlights flash by like memories he wasn't allowed to keep. He didn't cry. He only whispered goodbye to another town that had never known him. Childhood taught him how to say goodbye before he ever learned how to fit in. But amidst that loneliness, something took root. A belief that even if the world didn't see him, he could still build something lasting. The boy who lived in the shadows found his own light. In the church choir, his voice trembled with longing. At night, he wrote poems about the sky and second chances. He dreamed of wide-open lands of stories that would never have to be packed away in boxes. His father's discipline became his compass. His mother's faith became his foundation. The once fragile boy now stood 6 feet tall, but true growth came from within. "I guess I've just gotten used to starting over," he said. That's life. Every goodbye had forged his strength. Every silence had taught him how to listen. He realized early on that life doesn't owe us comfort. It only offers chances to begin again. And from those chances, Kevin Costner nurtured the courage to tell stories that move the world. What is a dream worth when you're 23, freshly graduated, newly married, broke, and too restless to be still? For Kevin Costner, the price was everything. In 1975, at California State University Fullerton, between classes, he met Cindy Silva. She was radiant, beautiful, like a modern Snow White, an aspiring actress with trusting eyes. He was the quiet one, a man who looked as though he had wandered in from somewhere else. They fell in love. In 1978, they married. Kevin, armed with a degree in marketing and finance, did what any dutiful son was expected to do. He found a stable job in the marketing industry. Every morning he buttoned his shirt, smiled at the world, and quietly drifted back to sleep inside. I think the girls with their nails done now. A steady paycheck, a predictable life. Cindy supported him, but the silence inside him was deafening. His heart didn't beat for numbers, it beat for stories. Then fate intervened on a flight back from Mexico after their honeymoon. Everything was ordinary until Kevin looked to his right and saw Richard Burton, a legend, one of the greatest living actors, sitting right beside him, lost in a book. The air felt heavy, compressed with tension. Nervous and trembling, Kevin confessed to Burton the secret that had been burning inside him. He wanted to act, but he was afraid to try, afraid of disappointing his family. Burton looked at him, his eyes weighed down by the thousands of tragedies he had performed. He simply said, "Your eyes are green. So are mine. I think you'll be just fine." Then he turned back to his book. When the plane landed, a sleek limousine was waiting right on the runway to pick Burton up. Kevin and his new wife, Cindy, stood on the curb waiting for the bus. When a limousine glided past, Burton leaned out the window. The noise of the world seemed to fade, and he whispered two words that would echo through Kevin's entire life. Good luck. That brief exchange stirred something deep inside him. Just a few weeks later, he quit his job. The world didn't applaud. His father, Bill, a man of stability, was furious. He couldn't understand, but Cindy did. She believed in him. They packed a single suitcase, an old coat, and drove their beat-up Datsun to Los Angeles with just enough money for gas. What followed wasn't some romantic struggle. It was hunger, cold, and quiet despair. He did everything he could. He scrubbed the decks of fishing boats, the smell of salt and diesel clinging to his skin. He drove delivery trucks. He even drove a tour bus through Hollywood, pointing out the grand gates of movie stars' mansions and wondering if he would ever have a house like that himself. Some nights the heater in his apartment broke down. He curled up fully dressed, whispering to himself, "Just one more day. Hold on." He carried a stack of headshots, now smudged with sweat, knocking on casting office doors that never seemed to open. "Leave your photo," they'd say, without even looking up. His shoes were worn thin. His stomach tightened from hunger. On rainy nights, he sat in his car outside the studio gates, watching the extras spill out under the lights, their laughter echoing through the mist while he sat in the darkness invisible. And through it all, he never called home. His pride wouldn't let him. Cindy worked double shifts to keep them afloat, her faith, the only wind moving through his life. The first breakthrough seemed to arrive a cheap beach movie called Sizzle Beach, USA. No pay, no promises, just a chance to stand in front of a camera. But the film was terrible. It was shelved and forgotten. Years later, after he became famous, they released it against his wishes. "I wish I could buy every copy and burn them all," he admitted. The humiliation was only half the pain. The other half was invisibility, 6 long, grinding years of it. Then came a role in The Big Chill, 1983, directed by Lawrence Kasdan. A major film. A real cast. He played the friend who had taken his own life, the one whose funeral brought all the characters together. He had filmed the flashback scenes. Finally, he had made it. But in the editing room, Lawrence Kasdan made a brutal decision. He cut all the flashbacks. Kevin Costner's entire role was erased. All that remained was a glimpse of his body being dressed in the opening scene. His name vanished. His hope barely flickered. He wasn't just broke. He was invisible again. He could have given up. Anyone else would have. But Kevin Costner didn't. He went back to acting classes, learning how to turn silence into truth rejection, into momentum. And then a small miracle happened. Lawrence Kasdan, the very director who had once cut his role, felt guilty. He promised to give Kevin a part in his next project. In 1985, Kasdan kept his word. That film was Silverado. When the cameras began to roll, Kevin Costner, playing a fiery young gunslinger named Jake, burst onto the screen. He was quick, magnetic, and deeply human. The forgotten man from the edge of Hollywood appeared as someone who had been waiting his whole life for that moment. The applause that followed wasn't for luck. It was for survival. The final door had opened. And what does glory taste like when it's mixed with sweat, doubt, and exhaustion? After Silverado, Kevin Costner didn't just step into Hollywood, he exploded onto the scene. In 1987, he became Elliot Ness in The Untouchables. Facing off against Robert De Niro's Al Capone, he embodied the essence of American virtue: quiet courage, moral conviction, a man standing tall amid chaos. The film grossed over $100 million, but what it truly gave Kevin was respect. For the first time, he wasn't fighting to be seen. He was fighting to be worthy of how people saw him. And he did. With Bull Durham in 1988 playing catcher Crash Davis, a weary, charming, and wise veteran of the minor leagues, he was more than just a movie star. He was a storyteller. But it was in 1989 that he etched his name into the very soul of America. Field of Dreams. When he, as Ray Kinsella, stood in that cornfield and heard the whisper, "If you build it, he will come," audiences felt as if he were speaking directly to them. For everyone who has ever lost a father, for everyone who has ever felt regret, for everyone who has ever built something out of faith and waited for a miracle the moment he asked the ghost of his father, "Dad, you want to have a catch," became one of the most heartbreaking and healing moments in cinematic history. At the same time, his personal life was its own field of dreams. Cindy, the woman who had believed in him through every hungry night, was now the wife of a superstar. They had 3 beautiful children: Annie, born in 1984, Lily in 1986, and Joe in 1988. He cried at the hospital each time, holding their tiny fingers and promising to build a world worthy of them. They lived in Ventura, far from Hollywood's glitter. There were picnics, lullabies, and sunlit family photos under the California sky. "Cindy believed in me before anyone else," he said. "That faith was like the wind behind every beginning." He had everything: a perfect family, a perfect career. He was the unofficial king of Hollywood. He could do anything, and so he chose to do the impossible. By 1990, at 35 years old, Kevin Costner was no longer content just to act. He wanted to create. He wanted to tell a story no one else dared to tell. He mortgaged his own money, founded TIG Productions, and set out to make Dances with Wolves. Hollywood called it Madness, a 3-hour Western told in the Lakota language of the Native Americans, complete with subtitles. They nicknamed it Kevin's Gate, a jab at the infamous disaster Heaven's Gate, and branded it a career suicide. Studios begged him to cut the long stretches of silence. He refused. He told them that silence was where truth lived, and he wanted the film to speak for those whom history had silenced. The production was a living hell. The budget ballooned to $22 million, an enormous sum at the time. Storms destroyed the set. The Buffalo refused to cooperate. Actors quit. And Kevin, both directing and starring, spent lonely nights in a freezing trailer wondering if he was destroying his life for a dream no one else believed in. When the film finally premiered, it wasn't just a success, it was an earthquake. Dances with Wolves earned $424 million worldwide. It won 7 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director for Kevin Costner. The once invisible boy from Linwood, the one who had driven tour buses through Hollywood, now stood at the very top of the world, holding 2 golden statues in his hands. But as he stood there beneath the warm spotlight in a flawless tuxedo, his heart felt strangely empty. He whispered, "I don't trust myself." The room erupted like thunder, but to him it was still the same silence where he had begun. And at home, Cindy watched through the television screen, their 3 children asleep nearby. Success had begun to consume the very things that had once sustained it. The following years were a whirlwind. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, 1991, grossed $390 million. JFK, 1991, tested his political courage. And then in 1992, The Bodyguard. He waited a full year for Whitney Houston, a music superstar who had never acted, to take the role. The studio was worried. A black leading lady and a white leading man, Kevin refused to compromise. "She's the one," he said firmly. On set, he became her real-life protector, shielding her from fear, calming her nerves. They formed a deep bond, an unspoken trust that would last long after the cameras stopped rolling. The film earned $411 million. The soundtrack sold 50 million copies. Kevin, who had turned down a $10 million salary in exchange for a share of the profits, made over $20 million. He had become one of the highest-paid, most powerful actors on the planet. But the price was steep. Fame crashed over him like a flood. The man who once came home smelling of paint now carried the scent of distant cities. He barely slept, days spent on set nights in the editing room. Cindy waited through missed birthdays and forgotten holidays. She raised 3 children, reading about her husband in magazines she never bought. Faith doesn't shatter all at once, it fades like the light at dusk. They tried. He paused his filming. They sought counseling, escaped to quiet cabins, hoping to rediscover laughter. But the distance had grown too wide. Whispers began about late nights, about infidelity. Nothing was ever proven, yet everything was poisoned. What do you think about this story? Leave a 1 if you agree, or a 0 if you don't. This story makes us reflect on the losses and invisible gaps in relationships. Is it true that love and trust can conquer all, or sometimes have time and misunderstandings become too difficult to heal? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to enjoy the video, like, share, and subscribe to support us. We truly appreciate your support. Success can be lonelier than failure, he admitted. Somewhere between airports and movie premieres, Forever quietly slipped away. In 1994, after 16 years together, they filed for divorce. The negotiations were brutal. There was no prenuptial agreement, only trust. And that trust now had a price. Cindy Silva, the woman who had believed in him when he had nothing, received one of the largest divorce settlements in Hollywood history, about $80 million, roughly $150 million in today's money. But money wasn't the greatest loss. You get to see the people you love most, your kids, only half the time, he said, his voice breaking. The night we signed the papers, I packed boxes, family, movies, memories. Hollywood called it an expensive divorce. To them, it was gossip. To him, it was a funeral for a life once whole. Kevin buried himself in work, believing that motion might somehow ease the ache of loss. But the storm was only beginning. What happens when a king loses his crown? Kevin Costner had bet everything on Dances with Wolves and won. He thought he could do it again. He was wrong. In 1995 came Waterworld. It was supposed to be his next triumph, a post-apocalyptic ocean epic. Instead, it nearly drowned him, quite literally. The production was a disaster chronicled in the headlines day after day. The original budget was $100 million, but it skyrocketed to $175 million, making it the most expensive film ever made at the time. A tropical storm destroyed the multi-million-dollar set. Actors were stung by jellyfish, and Kevin himself nearly died during one scene tied to a mast in the open sea. The press tore him apart without mercy. They didn't call it Waterworld, they called it Kevin's Gate, and Fish Tar, a mocking blend of fish and disaster. The film finally hit theaters, and it failed. It didn't make enough to cover its enormous costs. Hollywood's King Midas had turned gold into mud. He could have stopped. He could have stepped back. But Kevin Costner was too stubborn to surrender. He doubled down. In 1997 came The Postman, another post-apocalyptic epic 3 hours long, directed by and starring Costner himself. He believed in it. He believed it was a story about hope and the rebuilding of America. The world agreed the film was a complete financial and critical disaster. It swept the Golden Raspberry Awards, taking home Worst Picture, Worst Director, and Worst Actor. The same hands that had once trembled holding an Oscar now trembled with humiliation. At the same time, his personal life was adrift. 2 years after the divorce in 1996, he had a brief but genuine relationship with Bridget Rooney, heiress to the Pittsburgh Steelers. From that relationship came a son, Liam Timothy Costner. The news broke. Hollywood braced for a scandal. But Kevin, though shaken at first, did the right thing. A DNA test confirmed the truth. He immediately took responsibility, setting up a trust fund and providing full support. He refused to let any of his children grow up feeling unimportant. It wasn't a scandal. It was a quiet act of redemption. But now he was a 40-year-old man. His career shattered, his family broken. He had 4 children by 2 different women. The phone had stopped ringing. The rooms that were once full were now empty. Hollywood, the same place that once celebrated him, now saw him only through the lens of Waterworld. He was a joke, a relic of the 1990s. You can't answer every lie, he said quietly. You just outlive them. Fame, which had once filled him, was now just an echo. He could live without applause, but not without purpose. And for a while, he had lost both. She once shared with The Guardian, "I'm not chasing youth, I'm chasing vitality." At 80, her eyes remained sharp, her smile radiant, her walk regal. From the daughter of a taxi driver to a lady of the British Empire, from the small stages of Essex to the grand halls of Hollywood. Helen Mirren's life is proof that grace can endure beyond glory, and kindness can outlast fame. She has turned pain into art, loss into love, and time into... As night gently falls and the lights in the garden begin to dim, the world slips into a tender silence. She sits quietly savoring her cup of tea, her gaze lifted toward the deep night sky. The stars above shimmer like distant memories, smiling back at her. Around her, everything is still, only the whisper of the wind and the scent of roses remain. Amidst the blossoms and the moonlight, if you listen closely, you might almost hear her soft voice murmuring, "I did it." The truth doesn't need to shout, he said. It just needs time. Then something even more important happened. In 1998, he met Christine Baumgartner, a graceful, confident model and handbag designer 20 years younger than him. She was grounded, practical, and full of energy that reignited him. But he was afraid. He was broken. In 2002, they split. The reason: Christine wanted children. Kevin, who already had 4 kids and 1 painful divorce, didn't. He was afraid to start over. He was afraid to fail again. Priscilla Presley's story is a lesson in caution when pursuing beauty and youthfulness. Social pressures and beauty standards can lead us to make misguided decisions, but true beauty should never be built on risking one's health and safety. Choosing the right person with the proper expertise is crucial, and we must remember that lasting beauty comes from self-acceptance and taking care of ourselves safely and wisely. He simply said, "Your eyes are green. So are mine. I think you'll be just fine." Then he turned back to his book. When the plane landed, a sleek limousine was waiting right on the runway to pick Burton up. Kevin and his new wife, Cindy, stood on the curb with with their nails done. He took fewer roles. He spent more time at home. He had found his horizon. He had found peace. But for Kevin Costner, peace never lasts. In 2018, when Hollywood seemed to have forgotten him, as a force, Kevin Costner was reborn, not on the big screen, but on television. At 63, he became John Dutton, the weary patriarch of a ranching empire, a man fighting to protect what can never be replaced no matter the cost. "I'm not playing a hero," he said. "I play men who try." The weariness, the toughness, and the pain in John Dutton's eyes were real. They were Kevin's own. America felt it. Yellowstone became the most watched cable series on television, a true cultural phenomenon. Kevin Costner was once again the king. By its 5th season, he was earning $1.3 million per episode. He was back on top, and once again, the price was his home. Heaven doesn't burn, it erodes. Yellowstone demanded months of filming in Montana, far from his family. And at the same time, an old dream, an old obsession resurfaced. A project he had been nurturing since 1988, Horizon. An epic Western saga told in 4 chapters. Studios called it too long, too quiet, too expensive. They passed. So Kevin, just as he had done with Dances with Wolves, decided to do it himself. He mortgaged his ranch. He invested $38 million, and later even more of his own money. He poured every ounce of his heart, time, and energy into it. Christine left to hold the family together in California, began to feel invisible. She still set the table for 5 even on the nights he didn't come home. He was always gone in Montana or Utah, chasing his horizon. She wanted presence. He offered stability. Love, once hungry for attention, began to fade into silence. Not the kind that screams, but the kind that hums like a distant warning. And then it struck suddenly. May 2023. While he was on the set of Horizon, standing beneath the western sky he had built with his own hands, he received the papers. Christine had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Crew members recalled that he went completely still, as if the ground had fallen away beneath him. What followed wasn't the quiet heartbreak of 2 weary souls. It was a spectacle. A brutal legal war. A strict prenuptial agreement came into play. Christine's lawyers demanded $248,000 a month in child support. The court reduced it to $63,000. The headlines said a million things, but none mentioned the smallest loss of all 3 children waking up in separate homes. Under the terms of the separation, Christine was required to leave the Santa Barbara compound, the place where each of their children had taken their first steps. Neighbors said that on the day she left, the curtains fluttered like wings. That evening, Kevin came home. The house still carried a faint trace of her perfume, and for the first time in years, he realized that even silence has a scent. Then came the cruelest cut of all photographs splashed across the tabloids. Christine vacationing in Hawaii with Josh Connor, a mutual friend, a neighbor, a man Kevin had once called his friend.
I think the girls with their nails done now.
There was no proof of infidelity, only pain, and that was enough. For a man who had built his life and career on loyalty, the feeling was nothing short of betrayal. "I didn't want this," he quietly told friends. "I still love her. But there are things you just can't forget." For the second time in his life, he found himself dividing the world he had built with his own hands. The first time, he lost half his fortune. This time, he said he lost half his heart. On set, he kept filming Horizon through the storm, a man directing a story about horizons while his own was collapsing behind him. Fame had never felt so empty. The divorce storm of 2023 was just the latest. Kevin Costner's life has always been measured in quiet losses and goodbyes he was never ready for. When he lost his co-star and muse Whitney Houston, the world lost a voice. He lost something even more sacred. They had fought side by side to make The Bodyguard happen. He had protected her, believed in her when no one else did. When she finally stepped onto the set, shy, radiant, and full of light, he became her shield. They spent hours talking about God, about family, about the cost of fame. She called him my safe place. He called her the miracle I was meant to protect. Years passed. The spotlight faded. Whitney fought battles no one else could fight for her. Then the call came. February 11th, 2012. Whitney Houston was gone, 48 years old, alone in a hotel room. Kevin sat by himself for hours, staring into nothing. "Are you sure?" was all he could whisper. When her family asked him to speak at the funeral, he declined at first. He felt unworthy, his words not meaningful enough. But then Dionne Warwick called and said, "Kevin, there are things she needs to hear, and she needs to hear them from you." He had written his eulogy, slowly, pausing often, letting memories blur the ink. On the day of the funeral, standing before her casket, and millions watching, his voice trembled. He didn't speak about the superstar. He spoke about the little girl from the church choir who always wondered, "Am I good enough?" He looked down and said, "Whitney, you weren't just good enough. You were magnificent." And then he whispered the words that broke the world's heart, "And I will always love you." It was a farewell no director could ever write. Years later, he quietly admitted, "I wish I could have been there when she needed someone to protect her." But some pains cut deeper than fame. They are the pains of family. When his mother Sharon fell ill, he was far away chasing the very dream his parents had sacrificed for. Premieres, contracts, cameras. "I'm fine," she told him over the phone. "Just don't forget to rest." He was on set when the call came. The lights were too bright, the noise too loud. He stood there for a long time, the script trembling in his hands. He hadn't made it in time to hold her hand. He never got to hear her last words. At the funeral, he tried to stay strong for the woman who had spent her whole life being brave for everyone else. He thought the pain might fade, but 2 years later it returned sharper, deeper. His father Bill, a man of the land, the one who had taught him steadfastness, followed his wife into the silence. It was as if one heart couldn't bear the absence of the other. The news came early in the morning. Kevin sat alone in a hotel room. He had missed his mother's final breath, and now he had missed his father's as well. "That's the curse of distance," he said. "You spend your life chasing everything you think will make them proud, and when it finally happens, they're gone." That night he sat in his car long after everyone else had left, headlights off. No cameras, no audience. Only one son truly understood that the two people who had once held his world together were gone. He had fame, he had fortune, but suddenly, none of it seemed to matter. When your parents are gone, he said, the world becomes different. You become your own parent, and perhaps that's why at 70 years old, he's still fighting. What remains when the lights fade, when the applause dies, and when fate has taken nearly everything you once held dear? Today, at 70 years old, Kevin Costner stands in a place few ever reach, not on top of the mountain, but above it. His body is a map of battles fought. Age itself has become a quiet war. Waterworld scorched his skin. Open range cracked his ribs. Kidney stones tormented him for years, pain so fierce he needed strong medication, yet he never missed a single day on set. The shoulders that once carried Whitney Houston now ache from the cold. The back that once withstood explosions now remembers every fall. "Pain isn't my enemy," he said. "It's the reminder that I'm still alive." And he is alive, more alive than ever. His net worth exceeding $250 million isn't a monument to greed, but a testament to endurance. Dunbar Ranch in Aspen, valued at nearly $250 million, is a 160-acre masterpiece. A private baseball field where his children once played. A lakeside home where the sound of water feels like a heartbeat. It's beauty without arrogance, luxury woven with memory. His $60 million Santa Barbara estate overlooks the Pacific Ocean. In his garage rests a slice of history, a Shelby GT 35H, a Land Rover still dusty from the set, and an old wooden boat he pilots alone when the sea feels gentler than the city. But more important than what he owns is what he's created: 7 children, 7 living legacies. Annie, born in 1984, is a film producer following in her father's footsteps. Lily, born in 1986, is a gifted singer and songwriter. Joe, born in 1988, works behind the scenes in sound production. Liam, born in 1996, lives a quiet life, but their relationship is built on a deep, unspoken respect. And his 3 youngest, Caden, Hayes, and Grace, are now the center of his world. Hayes even appears briefly alongside his father in Horizon. They are family. Family, he says, isn't a chapter. It's the whole book, and I'm still writing mine. And that book, its final chapter, is Horizon. When the first chapter of Horizon premiered at Cannes in 2024, critics were divided. The film earned less than he had invested. Hollywood once again called it a failure. But Kevin Costner smiles. He's not chasing applause, he's keeping a promise to himself. He stands alone at the back of the theater, watching the final frame flicker across the screen, a man not looking at victory, but at his legacy. Because for him, every film isn't just a work of art. It's a fragment of his soul left behind for time to remember. From an invisible boy to a legend, Kevin Costner's life is a horizon of dreams, resilience, and unspoken loss. He's taught us that even in collapse, we can rise again. Which part of Kevin Costner's journey speaks to you most? Is it the gamble that changed his life, the price of fame, or the strength to begin again from the ashes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next powerful story.